Hello and welcome to the QA Therapy podcast. Are you looking to improve your overall testing and quality practices? My name is Sergio Freire and I'm a solution architect and a testing advocate at Xray.
And my name is Cristiano Cunha, and I'm also a solution architect and test advocate. And we'll be your hosts and QA therapists throughout this series. In this podcast, we're going to tackle some of the most common testing and quality challenges that we all face in our teams. So if this sounds good to you, keep on listening. In this episode, we will talk about testing in DevOps. Testing in DevOps, you say? Yes, you heard it right. To assist us on this topic, we have a special guest with us, so please stay tuned. Let's start with what has bring us here. What are you feeling that makes you come to this therapy? So, do your team knows what DevOps really stands for, or why it's important to make or try this approach? Or have you still feeling that you are see different roles within the team, working solo with very few pollination at work? Or even do you hear things like, let's automate everything? Or on the other way, do you have difficulty in understanding how to include testing in the pipeline? You can also have the feeling that it's hard to push something to production, even if you have already implemented it and testing in your local environment. Does your team see testing in production as something that that should not be done? Or do you feel that your team does not understand the different ways of testing in production? Or even do you see some team members that are lost about where to fit testing in a DevOps environment?
So what may be the problem here? All these are symptoms that appear when a shift towards DevOps is ongoing without being properly understood. What DevOps means, what value it brings to the table, all of those changes, the way we work within teams, my role and our roles as testers and quality seekers, how to fit it in testing in DevOps. Let's dive a bit into this topic. It's time for diagnosis and prescription, and today we have here with us Lisa Crispin, our expert QA therapist, to assist on diagnosis and prescription on these symptoms related to DevOps. Everyone in the testing field knows Lisa. She has written several books about testing, and she also is also keen on Agile and especially on the DevOps topic. Besides, she is quite helpful for the whole testing community. Welcome, Lisa. It's great to have you here. Are you comfortable in your QA therapy couch?
I'm actually sitting on a football. That's good therapy too. But thank you, Cristiano and Sergio. It's great to be here. Quite an honor to be invited as a guest therapist.
It's also great to have you here, Lisa.
Yeah, we wanted to start with a bang, so we are doing it.
So let's start with the first question. Yeah,
let's start with the first question. Yes. So I know that we could be hours talking about DevOps, but let's perhaps start with what DevOps means. In your perspective, what do you think it means, DevOps, Lisa?
Yeah, I was puzzled by this term for a while too, because the term DevOps was coined by Patrick Dubois in 2009, I believe. And before that, you know, I was working on a team that started as complete chaos and over the years became high performing by learning good practices and trying to continually improve. And the truth was that after a few years, we had a deployable, releasable build artifact we could put into production anytime we wanted. We did not release every day because our business stakeholders preferred it every 2 weeks because our customers didn't want too much change at once. But we were already using the techniques that people use today, although they were more rudimentary and there were fewer tools for it. Things like release feature toggles or feature flags and hiding those features from customers until we were ready to turn them on. And we didn't have a word for this ourselves on that team. And then Dave Farley and Jez Humble wrote their book, Continuous Delivery. And I was like, oh, there's a word. And I read that book and was really surprised. It was pretty much all about testing. They actually asked me to review the book as a technical reviewer before they published it. And I was like, well, I can't review a book that's like operations stuff. Of course, I worked together with the person on my small team who did the sysadmin work, and I'd done a lot of sysadmin work, and I could get to log files, I could deploy to production, but it wasn't my area of expertise. And they're like, no, we really want you to read it. And after I read it, it's like, oh yeah, because it's a book about testing. And so we had that term, continuous delivery. It made a lot of sense. So let's put tiny changes in production really frequently to reduce our risk. And then the term DevOps came around, and I'm like, well, what's this? I've been on an Agile team since 2000. And of course, we have the operations people included on our team. But, I was working for a small startups. And what I didn't know was that a lot of big enterprise companies, we're going to do the Agile thing. We'll make cross-functional teams. But they didn't include the operations specialists. And so they were throwing build artifacts over the wall to operations and say, okay, you release it, you take care of it. We're moving on to the next feature. And that was terrible. And so I really have embraced this idea of, yes, we need to make sure that we include that. And it's more about building the DevOps culture. So
Exactly.
I was really lucky in my last full-time job that organization did a great job of building the DevOps culture. So an example is always good. So as a therapist, I'll provide an example. So we had platform teams that were, something weird's happened to my computer. We had platform teams that were responsible for building the infrastructure, building the runway for the feature teams to use. And people from the SRE, site reliability engineers from the platform teams, one would be embedded in each feature team. And they would help us, we're going to use this new production pipeline tool. We're going to change from this one to that one, and we're going to help you. We're going to work together with you. You help us create a testing strategy, which is where I could contribute. And we're going to test it and make sure it's good. And then we're going to transition over to it. And then you're going to take care of it because now you know how to use it and configure it, and you can make all the changes. Conversely, and this is, I thought, the best thing, they would take developers from feature teams and embed them on the platform team. Because what's the platform team doing? They're writing infrastructure as code. They need to do a good job of writing code. And so these expert developers join their teams, not always permanently, but usually temporarily, and help them do a better job of taking care of their code, learning the good practices. And I just think that's a great example. I mean, to me, that this is what a DevOps culture should be. And I, as a tester, if I wanted to talk to anyone on the platform teams, whether it's an engineer, a manager, whoever, they were always happy to talk to me. Let's book a meeting. They would offer help. Oh, we're gonna try to use Datadog more. Anyone on your team, I'll have this 30-minute meeting slot every week. Or if we need more time, we'll take more time. You just join me and bring me whatever problems you have. And that's just that collaboration. That's the magic.
Yeah, I just your words really resonate with me. I share my experience also with my migration from SDET to SRE, and I feel the same things. And do you think that the terms DevOps actually can hinder the will of the tester of being involved because it's not there, or because they don't understand it, they feel that they have nothing to do with it? Because I see sometimes that the tester is not that much involved.
Mm-hmm. I think that some testers are sort of scared off by it. They think especially they hear the word ops, and a lot of testers haven't had the good fortune to get to work together with operations specialists, and kind of the history of operations as using the command line interface and working in Unix and all those cryptic commands that we need to use. And although that's changed a lot, now we have these really nice UIs to do things in. Configuration is automated and a lot easier. But And I don't think that the operations specialist has necessarily invited testers to help them in all cases. So
Yes.
And I, you know, it's cool. It's so cool that you made the transition from SDET to SRE. I was inspired by Abby Bangser, who also has done that, and and you know, she still considers herself a tester, but she works as an SRE. And I really wanted to do that too. And I realized though I personally couldn't do that because, you know, I was a programmer back in the day, but I don't really like writing code anymore. I like pairing with people who are writing code and asking them questions and looking at the patterns and their practice, you know, what they're doing, and I can help them prevent bugs that way. But writing code on my own, and I feel like to actually be an SRE, yes, you need to write code. But at the same time, without needing to write code, like I say, I can pair with people. I can help them create test strategies. I can help them do the testing. It's just opening your mindset to say, well, this is something I need to learn. And my great testing skills, asking questions, identifying risks, helping people brainstorm about risks, spotting patterns, anomalies. We look at our dashboards. When I worked with cross-functional teams, it's often the testers who notice something funny has happened in production. This is not a normal pattern. Often the developers don't notice it, the testers notice it first. So there's just so much we can contribute there. And you know, I won't even get into testing and production, but that's another area. But you know, that's what I've tried to do for the past several years is educate myself and then try to help other people realize, you know, there are a lot of resources out there, so many blog posts, videos, books, podcasts, webinars, courses that we can use to learn and we just need to be able to communicate with these other specialists. That's what it's all about. So learn the terminology, learning the purpose of all these different activities, and then we can collaborate and add value.
Giving just an additional thought, do you think in general there is this lack of understanding of what DevOps really is across teams? Do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the word agile, you know, it's become loaded with definitions that don't make any sense. People have DevOps teams, they have DevOps engineers, and it's like, this doesn't make any sense. Either you're a developer specialist or you're an ops specialist. You're not both. But you do have that combination. You know, it's a T-shaped skill thing. And I don't think Patrick, when he coined that term, I think he was trying to just show we need to work together. I don't think he was saying we need to have a new person or a new team and this is what their title is.
Or a new role.
It's just people we humans seem to love labels and we adopt them. And, you know, DevOps, maybe just like, you know, a lot of teams say, oh, we're doing stand-ups every day and we're releasing to production every 2 weeks and we use Jira, so we're agile. So some people might say, well, we've got Datadog and you know, we've got a deployment pipeline, so we're DevOps.
Yeah, Grafana and Prometheus. And yeah, we are DevOps for sure. No, that's true. But giving all of that, why do you feel that you should try DevOps? Do you have any tips on how to start from?
You know, Katrina Kolke has a wonderful book, A Practical Guide to Testing in DevOps, available on LeanPub, and you can even buy it for free. She doesn't mind. I'm sure she'd rather have money for it. But the book has a big section on building relationships, and I think that's the key, and that's really what's worked for me. You know, building relationships within your team, but also outside your team. And so, you know, I'm a shy person. We're all a bunch of introverts in software development. But when I started a new job, I try to, because I know I'm going to be interested, I find out who are the people on these teams, and then I just contact them and say, hey, you know, could I have a 30-minute meeting with you? And, you know, if that goes well, I say, hey, could we do this every couple weeks? And it's so interesting because, like, at my last job, I set up one-on-ones with one of the managers of one of the platform teams, and he's very interested in Agile and testing and stuff too. So we had a lot of common interests. And he started telling me about this new tool they were going to use for the deployment pipelines. And so I had that in my mind, and then on my team, it's like, oh, we're going to transition to use this new tool. Lisa, could you help us create a test strategy? And I mean, that was a bit scary, but it's like, well, I've already talked to Buck about this tool. And so I set up another meeting with him, and I said, oh, what are the risks involved in transitioning to this new tool? What should we be looking for? What should we be sure to test? What are the highest priority things that we need to make sure they work? What don't we need to worry about? And he gave me so much information, and I wouldn't, because I'd taken the trouble to find out who's on these teams and who can I talk to and who would be interested in talking to me. Now they're ready to help me. And and so I could really take that back to the developer I was working with and the SRE I was working with to say, okay, here are some of the risks that we really need to look out for. We created our testing strategy. We created some exploratory testing charters and a few automated tests that we could do, and it just made all the difference. Where otherwise I would have just said, what? I have never used that tool before. I don't have any idea what we should.
Yeah.
So it's building those relationships. That's what's important. Communication and collaboration. I was talking with Christine Wiedemann yesterday. She's a very experienced testing practitioner and a leader. She's been working even at the executive level, but managing software teams and testers. And we're talking about the changing role of testers, and this is something that Janet Gregory, my co-author, and I talk about a lot too. Of people talk, what skills do testers need? And people talk about, oh well, we need to automate tests and we need exploratory testing, and those are all good skills. But the basic things we need are communication, so that we can collaborate, and we need to be facilitators, to help people, like I said, brainstorm about risks or think about what we need to improve. What's the biggest thing in the way of the quality we want to achieve? We need to have coaching skills to help people. We need to have consulting skills to help the non-testers on our team get those testing skills, because as Janet and I have been advocating for a couple of decades now, it's the whole team that needs to take responsibility for all these things, whether it's quality and testing, whether it's DevOps, however you want to define that. We all need to be involved. We all need to communicate, and those skills are so important, and they're often overlooked. People will send somebody to a class on, Selenium or a class on
but they won't. Many people start with learning Selenium, Java and Selenium, and that's it. But let me take this topic of skills and because I think it's really important, and you mentioned collaboration, building relations, and it's deeply important, also in my perspective. But now that we have DevOps, when we have this pipelines, infrastructure as code, and a bunch of tools to assist in this whole build and delivery process and operation and maintenance. Do you think as testers, we need also to improve other skills beyond the ones that you mentioned? Let's say more technical skills.
Because we need to communicate, we need to speak the language a little bit, right? So a lot of times, whenever I do a workshop on testing in DevOps or testing in continuous delivery, I always start by, well, what is continuous delivery? What is DevOps? What's continuous deployment? Why is it different? What's a pipeline? And just having those the vocabulary to talk. And then I think it's really important, especially now in our remote world where so many of us are working remotely, we need visual tools to help us have those conversations. And so, for example, when teams are struggling with their cycle time, they're not getting things out to production as fast as they would like to. Well, let's visualize that. I like Abby Bangser's pipeline exercise, where let's take all the steps or all the stages from when I commit a change to production as a developer on the team to when that gets out to production, or when I commit a change to the repo and it gets to production. What happens in between? And some of those things are automated, or maybe none of those things are automated. It's still your pipeline. And then laying that out visually, either if you're co-located with cards on a table or on a virtual whiteboard with virtual sticky notes, now we can see where are our bottlenecks. Where's the biggest thing that we can start working on to speed up this process and shorten our cycle time? We need to be able not only to deploy releases to production, new changes, but we need to deploy fixes really fast sometimes. So it's really, really important. So that's just an example. If we just sat around and talked about it, we wouldn't get very far. But when we see it, it helps us think outside the box, think laterally, not just think logically step by step, but be creative. What can we do to make changes here? And it also helps us understand it better. I mean, people use things like value stream maps or wordly maps. Those are so powerful because, for one thing, it helps our brains work better. I mean, I've learned brain science from people like Linda Rising, and you know, moving things around, even on your computer screen, using visuals, drawing, those all help us think better.
Yeah, about the relations, where are the blockers, where are the potential risks, for example.
And then talk about risks. Things like risk storming, Baron von Dahla's risk storming, using test sphere cards. You don't have to use test sphere cards, but just, well, let's pick our top 6 quality aspects, because I learned this from João Proença, that we have the paradox of choice. If we try to think about if more than half a dozen choices, we get frozen. We can't move forward. So let's pick our top 6 quality attributes. Think about what are the biggest risks around those top 6 aspects of quality that we want to deliver. And now how can we mitigate those risks? What are all the techniques and heuristics and things that we can use? And so again, a visual activity. So I think it's really important for testers to learn, like, they are facilitation skills, and learning, we have to try to learn how to influence people too, which is really hard, because people think what they think and they don't even know why they decided that, and getting them to think in a different way can be hard. But just getting people, let's try an experiment, let's try this technique and see if it helps us solve our problem or helps us move forward. So we have to hopefully we all work in a psychologically safe environment where we're not afraid to suggest things and we're not afraid to fail. But it still takes courage to get outside your comfort zone and get your teams like, let's take 30 minutes and try, whatever it is, example mapping, or,
let's reflect a bit, try to see and work on this problem together, because sometimes we try to solve a huge problem by ourselves, and it can be impossible to tackle.
And the other thing we can do is, again, takes a little courage outside our comfort zone, especially because some organizational cultures don't have this built in yet, is being able to pair with people or work in an ensemble with people. So set up a session, like, oh, let's take 30 minutes and could somebody join my Zoom room, and we need to test this new pipeline tool, and could some people volunteer to get together and do this? And so now you've got a bunch of different people who've got good diversity, people with different skills, and in 30 minutes you can really make a lot of progress to see if things are working well or you've got a lot of problems. So or just pairing it with somebody. Lisi Hawk lately has been she started a new job about 6 months ago, and she's been posting on Twitter every now and then, like, oh, today I paired with a developer or whoever it was, and we learned or we discovered this new problem, and we had this surprise. Surprises they might not be good surprises, but you need to learn about
unexpected
it.
At least,
You learn about it by getting together. But it takes if your team's not already comfortable with pairing and working in an ensemble, that can be hard to suggest. But you could just say, hey, can you take 10 minutes and help me with this configuration? I'm not sure how it should work, or little baby steps to introduce new ideas.
For sure.
One thing that I would also like to ask is about, let's say, with DevOps, we have automation playing also a key part of because we stick these fast feedback loops.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes people may think that, okay, testing in DevOps is just test automation scripts running on the pipeline, but
Yep.
it's much more than that, right, Lisa? Where does test fit into this DevOps and the infinite loop? That, well, I'm making this question. I know that you have a great infinite loop with all this explained, but if you want to briefly do a
Well,
summary.
Dan Ashby a few years ago, he took the DevOps loop and said, we test here, we test here, we test here. And he called it the continuous testing loop, which is a perfect word for it. But then continuous testing got co-opted as the word for automated test scripts in CI and continuous integration. Yeah. It's like, well, that's part of it. So that's why Janet had the idea, let's use the word holistic, because it's not already branded to mean something else. And we just want people to think about the different stages of things around that DevOps loop and what kind of testing that we do. And when we get to that deploy part, maybe we're deploying to a test environment, and so maybe now we can do some exploratory testing as well as running our automated tests. Or we might be deploying to production using feature toggle or some dark launches, some technique to hide it from customers, and doing testing in production. And then we've already, in our build phase or even our planning phase, we decided what data do we want to capture in our log data, what events, what data, well, we want to capture everything if we can, and use our wonderful technology we have nowadays to look at that data, because it's a huge amount of data, and interpret it. What do we want to have on our monitoring dashboards? What do we think we might need to solve problems in production? So, how can we enable our observability? So then when we get on the right side of that loop, now we're looking at that data. And that's a problem. A lot of teams I've been on, we all get the heads down, building the next thing, and we're not looking at the monitors.
Yeah.
We're not looking at the alerts coming into Slack.
People like to ship things, but then they tend to forget about
and so we have to make those working agreements and decide when there's a failure in their pipeline, when there's a problem in production, how are we going to respond to it? Who's going to take responsibility for making sure it gets looked at and fixed as quickly as it can? And then, as we come back around towards the left side of the loop, what have we learned from how this is behaving in production as well as test environments? And so how that feed changes. Where do we need to focus our testing in a different way? Do we need to change how something behaves to solve the customer's problems? Do we need to capture more data? The worst thing is knowing you have a problem in production, but you don't have the telemetry to tell you about it. So now you've got to add instrumentation to your code and redeploy.
And wait to happen again, right?
Yeah. But Janet and I just wrote a blog post on the learning and experimenting part of, let's pick one or two things where we want to improve or change, and design an experiment around it, have a hypothesis, have some way to measure success for our team. And so as we build something new, we can incorporate that experiment.
Continuous learning is really, really something important.
Yeah, and again, it's just a visual model. It's just a thinking tool to help us have good conversations. It's it's a tool, not a rule. It's just something to help guide us. And again, I'm such a fan of visuals.
Yeah, for sure, because it materializes what you think, and you can share it with others. So it's really powerful, instead of just thinking in your head, and sometimes you cannot share it. But let me just take one of the things that you have said. And one from my experience, I saw that we have transitioned from Agile to DevOps, and the biggest impact, the biggest change that I saw in my team was when we had to support production, because before we didn't, and now we had a 24-hour support production. That was the trigger that made all of my teams start worrying about what's happening in production, what performance that we need to have, because I don't want to be waked up at the middle of the night. Have you seen those triggers in your teams or in your experience, or are they the same?
I mean, change is hard, and if people don't feel pain, they're not going to be very motivated to change. And it's just like it's just like test automation.
Yeah.
When I joined teams that didn't have any automated tests, rather than be the tester who does all the horrible soul-crushing manual regression testing, with the support of management, with the manager.
Yeah.
Here are all of our regression test scripts divided up amongst everybody in the team. Suddenly, everyone's very interested in automating those checks, and that's the same with supporting your code in production. Yeah. You're feeling that customer pain directly. I have worked a lot in customer support and production support, and so I have felt that customer pain, and I think it's really useful.
I think really too
motivating, yeah. And it holds the team more accountable, and it's a faster feedback loop instead of somebody on another team, the bug gets reported in production, it gets put in Jira, and then maybe weeks later it comes into the backlog, and they look at it, they don't even remember writing that code.
Yeah.
So, and what I've found on the teams that took responsibility, they get really, nobody really wants to have to be the dev on dev. Well, but they really get engaged in it. They really care.
Yeah.
And I think it does make them more conscious of, let's use test, let's embrace test-driven development, because that's been shown to prevent like 80% of bugs. Why wouldn't we do that? Let's use a static analysis tool to make sure that our code is meeting the standards that we've set for ourselves. Just so many things that you can do, these good core practices, and feeling the customer pain so directly, and also knowing, like the last place I worked, when there was an incident in productions, the team it wasn't blaming, but the team whose change caused that, they had to figure out how much did it cost the company in lost revenue.
Oh,
and
that's powerful.
That is, it's like, wow, it is really important.
Yeah.
And so caring for our product in production, it makes us love the product more and put more love into it, and love our customers more. So I think it's totally positive. And I've just, I've never been on a team where that didn't work well. But teams I've been on where the developers were isolated, there was a separate team to handle production issues, things don't get better.
No, for sure. I remember some teams where besides that, you had like a PowerPoint file being done to pass the report from one side to the other, and someone was using a semaphore, changing the colors of the lights in the semaphore to say, well, this is like yellow, this is red. Someone would then go to the PowerPoint and change. No, this is not red. Put just yellow.
Arguing about what color,
Only the reds are bad, the rest.
But those visuals can be powerful, and again, a lot of my experiences with small startups, so it's easier to do those. But I remember back this team that I was on from 2003, when we started with Complete Chaos, and we couldn't get a green build in 2 weeks. We started because we wanted the executives to understand what was happening, right? And so our Scrum Master put together this calendar, very simple. And you talk about red and green and orange.
Yeah.
And so every day we had at least one good build that, our CI went all the way to success. That would be green. And then red if we had a test failure and we didn't solve it all day, which as we had a working agreement, that was our highest priority after a production issue, a production down. We would fix the build. And then yellow, if something happened, like the server went down for some, the machine itself overheated, something beyond our control. And it was surprising to me that the top managers, they looked at that. And if there were 2 or 3 days in a row where they're red, they would come over and say, what's going on?
Yeah.
And it makes them understand the importance of testing. It makes them understand the importance of all this infrastructure. And so, like I say, anything that, but it has to be meaningful. It can't be somebody arguing over whether it should be orange or green or red.
Yes.
People have to be
They have
honest about it. And that could have been automated too, of course, but this was back in the day when we didn't have so many cool tools to hook up.
Cool.
Being able to hook a much later team, we were ignoring the team was just not noticing when the deployment pipeline failed. And so we got together. It's like, okay, let's brainstorm. What can we do to make sure we take care of this? And we decided to hook up a blue. This was most of the team was in an office, so we hooked up a blue police light to the build.
Oh,
that caught everybody's attention.
I've been there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like an ambulance one, and it's
kind of have to depend on
it,
but when you create a new habit, something like that can really help.
Yeah, for sure. And looking now a little bit more on this fast feedback loops and everything that happens in DevOps, we have now those manual or exploratory testing that we need to continue to do. So how can you fit that on this fast loop? Do you want to stop everyone?
That's a great question. And when we draw out our pipelines, when we remember to include the things that are what Janet and I prefer to call it human-centric. Some things that can be automated are human-centric. Now, sometimes things are done manually because they just haven't been automated yet. But the things that cannot be automated, I was just at the Agile Testing Days USA last month, and I went to a great talk on accessibility testing. And the presenter said, if any tool vendor tells you they can automate more than 30% of accessibility testing, they are lying. Run away. Because those things have to be done ideally by somebody with disabilities whose problems are being solved by those. And so laying out our pipeline and using a different color for the manual things, can they be automated? No. Okay, now we have to use our release strategies, feature toggles, feature flags, canary launches, what do they call it? Graduated rollout, is that the right term for it? My brain's not quite working. But anyway, there are a lot of different release strategies to hide things from customers until we're comfortable with them. So we just hide the feature until we're done with our exploratory testing. If we're now confident that it's going to work fine for the customers, then we flip it on. So we've got the technology to do that these days, but we have to be conscientious about it. Because you're not going to do any kind of manual exploratory testing for something you're trying to release every day or multiple times a day. And the other thing that I've experienced is when my team, I was on the Pivotal Tracker team for several years, and we decided we were doing every 2-week releases, and we decided we wanted to move toward continuous delivery, and so we're trying with twice a week deploys to production. And that's a really long story, but one of the things that solved our many problems, because as soon as we started doing that, we started having horrible problems in production, was we had 2 testers on the team for like 25 developers. Well, we're not going to do exploratory testing for twice weekly release.
Yes, twice as much. Yeah.
In that amount of time. And so what the development managers realized is, we don't have enough exploratory testing. So they asked us testers first we had workshops to teach the non-testers on the teams how to do it, or at least some of the skills, and then we paired with them. So we just took, rotate around pairing with the developers, and they did the exploratory testing at the story level. So you can do some manual exploratory testing just at a story level. And one of the developers and I created a little, kind of cheat sheet of, make sure you do at least these things. And speaking of cheat sheets, we had Elizabeth Henderson's testing heuristics cheat sheet to help give them ideas. And then we still had exploratory testing at the feature or epic level, where the testers would collaborate with developers and the product owner and different people to come up with the exploratory test charters, put them in the backlog along with the feature stories. And those would also get done not only by the testers, though, other people joined in those. But it was just transformative. The number of problems we had in production went dramatically down when they started taking responsibility for exploratory testing at the story level.
At the story level, yeah.
Lisa, time flies, but
Yes,
any
I talk a lot too. Sorry.
and any final thoughts or tips for these teams trying to adopt DevOps or?
Just make every problem a team problem. Solve it together, and don't try to fix everything at once. You know, pick the biggest thing in your way. You know, when you want to get to continuous delivery, and you know, so for an example, my team, what was getting in our way was not enough exploratory testing. Okay, let's all brainstorm what we could do about that, and let's try some experiments around that, see how they work. I think one thing that's really important is to get meaningful metrics. Like set a goal. How are you going to measure progress to that goal? A lot of teams set a goal, but they don't. Then they have
measure.
a retrospective and like, how's it going? Well, I feel like it's going okay. Well, feelings are important. You know, I don't
Yes.
discount them, but maybe can we look at our cycle time? Can we look at, you know, how quickly we respond to production problems, or how fast our pipeline is?
Sometimes we have to also show to other stakeholders that what we are doing has actually a real impact, and showing with numbers is different in my experience.
Exactly.
And be able to compare the past with the present. It's also important.
That's
it's
so
not just a feeling, it's something that is there that you can compare. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that helps teams get on track with making improvements.
Thanks for being here with us, Lisa. We'll probably talk again for another episode, as I think DevOps is picking up and challenges will be common in software development overall, and probably we'll need to reflect once again about any other symptoms that users may.
I'm so excited that you're doing this,
Yeah.
because you know it's raising people's consciousness about it and showing how it's important and it's fun, and we all need to get involved.
Indeed. Sharing and learning together I think are really crucial for us to evolve. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Lisa.
Before ending our episode, it's time for some vitamins. We know that in general they're good for our health. In this case, we'll be talking about vitamin X, where X stands for Xray. Xray can be used for managing and tracking all types of testing. This includes the test automation results coming from the pipelines, along with other approaches, such as exploratory testing or even manual scripted test cases. It's crucial to give teams the flexibility they need to run the tests they want, the way they want. But it's also important to track all this in one place, accessible by all the team members. Not just to see the test results, but also to track their impacts on the related deliverables, such as the stories or more traditional requirements. And with Xray, you may link your automated test results with the existing stories or requirements in Jira, right from the code, simplifying the developers and tester lives. A test fails on the pipeline, so what? What component of the system is being impacted? What feature? The decision to release or not is yours. You're able to assess how all of your different test results reflect on the stories, which you can group by priority, components, or even risks. There is no single perspective whenever analyzing a given software project. With Xray, you can easily understand the shippable deliverables from the perspective that matters most to you. You can also easily trace from defects to tests to the related stories and epics. Having quality-related information is key to enable informed decisions, and Xray may help you on that.
And we are reaching the end of another episode. And in here we have saw that DevOps is not a role, nor a team, nor a set of tools. DevOps is a cultural mindset together with a set of practices. The goal is to have devs and ops working closely together to make teams more efficient and have a better understanding about the whole software build and delivery process. This is also closely involves testing, by understanding that testing is not something we do just at a given moment by running some test automation scripts, running on the pipelines. Testing is crucial to improve everything the team does, from the ideas, the refinement, and implementation. And finally, to understand how these are ultimately used or not by real users. Do not lose our upcoming episode to understand a bit more about exploratory testing and how it is so important, no matter in which context you work. So see you in our next therapy session. Happy testing!
Happy testing!